August in Texas. I think every single day in the month of August hit 100 degrees or more, often as high as 109, which meant a lot of time to stay inside in the air conditioning and read. So I finished 9 books this month. Here are my reviews. Welcome to my August book reviews. I just mentioned how hot it's been, and you may hear a thunderstorm going on as I film this, which is a great thing. It's been kind of drought-like conditions here the last month in Texas. But I did read 9 books in August. Sorry this wrap-up is a little bit late, but I had some other videos I needed to get out first. But these are the 9 books that I read in August. I always group these by genre, so if you want to check out the chapters below, if you want to skip a certain genre or skip to a certain genre, feel free to do that. Just make sure you stop back at the end and see my book of the month, which is a great work of classic fantasy. Let's start with an audiobook that I listened to in its entirety this month because it was a pretty quick one. That was a memoir by Kevin Smith entitled Tough Something About a Lazy Slob Did Good or something. Anyway, I'll put it up here. This was an audiobook I listened to, and this is probably the best way to... My music stand holding my books just collapsed. I read some chunkers this month. Anyway, I was talking about, Kevin Smith's memoir. I think this is good as an audiobook because you get kind of his delivery, and he does some clever asides along the way. This is everything that you would expect, I think, from a book by Kevin Smith. It is at times highly intelligent, at times brilliant, at times utterly profane, and at times just absolutely cringeworthy. In fact, this is a book definitely as profane and as you can get, and there were moments where I was reading this book and thinking, why did he include this? How did his loved ones let him include this in this book? So it's not for everybody. I do like a lot of Kevin James movies. Kevin James, no, he's the actor. Kevin Smith's movies. I liked Clerks. Dogma is my favorite of his, and I just love his tone and kind of his irreverence, and that comes out in the memoir. It's not groundbreaking. It's entertaining. If you like Kevin Smith and his brand of humor and his brand of kind of himself, you may like this book. If you don't, it's probably a skippable one for you. As for me, I gave Kevin Smith's memoir a solid 3 out of 5. Let's go next into the realm of literary fiction and talk about The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. Now, this is a work of contemporary Japanese fiction. In fact, it's called, I think this collection here it's from Vintage Japan, and this is kind of modern classics. There's some works by Murakami in this series. And this is a book that is one of those books, as I was reading it, I was enjoying it, but I wasn't really sure why. So I'm glad I had some time to kind of just sit and process what it was about this book that I liked. Let me give you the premise first, because that's such a big part of it. The Housekeeper and the Professor is about essentially those two characters, and it's from the housekeeper's perspective, because the professor, whom she is hired to clean his house and take care of things, has this brain injury where he can only remember the last 80 minutes of his life. So the professor has suits where he attaches little messages to himself that says, you have a brain injury, you only remember 80 minutes, the housekeeper's name is this, and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting read. It was a really quick read and a really engrossing read. I just found myself totally immersed in this story. While I was reading it, I didn't understand why I was liking it. Upon reflection, what I really enjoyed about this was seeing this relationship develop between these two people despite this great obstacle of the professor could only remember the last 80 minutes. So even if he's in a different room with the housekeeper, 80 minutes later, he doesn't even remember who she is. And seeing kind of this relationship, platonic relationship, evolve despite those obstacles, I just love the humanity of it all. And I've been thinking about it quite a bit. And it's a very interesting story. It goes a lot of different directions. The housekeeper's son becomes part of the story at one point, and I just found it very endearing. I gave it 4 out of 5, but I think it's a book that rating may elevate through time as I think about this one more. But I really enjoyed The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. Let's go next to the fantasy genre. I finished a very large short story collection, which just dropped to the floor. This is Conan's Brethren by Robert E. Howard. I have right above me here Conan the Barbarian of the Complete Chronicles by Robert E. Howard. This is a lot of short stories featuring a lot of his other heroes. Kull the Conqueror, Solomon Kane, Bran Mac Morn, and a host of others. And I've been reading these. This year I started this thing where I read a short story between each novel that I read. And it's been good to kind of break things up that way, have just a little bit of a kind of a palate cleanser between things. I love Howard's writing. I love how he can just immerse you in his world and his story so quickly. I do think this collection's a little more uneven than the Conan Chronicles. With the Conan Chronicles, you went in each one kind of knowing the main character, what they were all about. You had a pretty good idea of the setting. This one, he had to kind of establish the setting in a lot of these stories, so it wasn't quite as connective for me as far as the stories connecting to one another and the stories connecting to me as a reader. But there's a lot of really good ones. I loved when there's a novella in here called Almuric. There's a Bran Mac Morn story that also has Kull the Conqueror that actually has time travel in here. That's great, and I really enjoyed it. Since it's the 21st century, I have to talk about kind of one aspect of this book that could be a trigger for some people. Howard's writing, since it was very early 20th century writing, there are elements of racism in his writing. A lot of times, I'm the kind of reader that I try to place the book when it was written and not gloss over, but just kind of accept how certain things would be written at the time that wouldn't be written now, like an element of racism. In the fantasy stories that are set in another world, like Conan or some of these other ones, it was easier to overlook those kinds of things. But when it's Solomon Kane and he's on the continent of Africa, it was really hard to overlook those kinds of things. But despite that, I did really enjoy this collection. I love Howard's writing, and I'll read more. I have a lot of it between these two volumes, but anything else that I discover, I'll probably pick up. But I gave Conan's Brethren a 4 out of 5. The other work of fantasy that I finished this month was Robin Hobb's Renegade's Magic. This is the third book in the Soldier's Son trilogy, which is kind of the forgotten trilogy by Robin Hobb. She has 6-book series. 5 of them are The Realm of the Elderlings, which we see up here, and then there's the Soldier's Son trilogy, which is set in another world. If you've seen my previous 2 months wrap-ups, June and July, you'll know that I haven't been real high on this series, despite Hobb being my favorite fantasy author and one of my top 2 authors of all time. However, the way the second book ended, I was really excited to see where she was going to take this story, because I thought it was a bold ending, and it was kind of something I was looking for the entirety of the first 2 books. And it kind of starts that way, but unfortunately, although it's plausibly done and a lot of the things that I have critiques about this book are author choices that I just didn't agree with, she kind of backtracks upon this big, bold event that happened at the end of the second book. And I found that disappointing. Even though this book did go a very different direction, it went a direction that I enjoyed the most out of these 3 books. There's some elements of kind of the duality of this main character that are explored that I really enjoyed in this book. And you got to see another aspect of this world, which I will say, as much as I did not love this trilogy, the world building is superb. It's so well done in just 3 books. There's another element that this had the potential for me, despite not liking how she backtracked on that one decision. It had the potential at the very end to be something magnificent, because about 2/3 of the way through the book, this character makes a bold choice, embraces one of the sides of him. I won't say which one, because if you read it, I don't want to spoil it. And it was bold and it was beautiful. I had tears in my eyes in this chapter, and I didn't even think I cared about this character, but it was so, so well written. After all, it's Robin Hobb. And that would have been a great conclusion to the book. And then she kind of backtracked from that and gave us 140 more pages, I think in an effort to give you more closure and to maybe give you maybe a little happier ending to things. But it didn't make things better. For me, it detracted. This could have been close to a 5-star read, at least a 4-star read, with that ending, which was 140 pages from the end. Because I found in the closure chapters, I didn't really care about most of these characters, so I really didn't care to get closure from them. So overall, this was a disappointing series. I can't recommend it for anyone but the Hobb completionist. If you want to experience Hobb, read any of those 5 series. Read them in order, but certainly pick up Farseer or the Live Ship Traders trilogy before you pick this up. Renegades Magic, I give a 3.5 out of 5. Let's go next to science fiction, which dominated the month of August for me. And let's start with a work by Justin Cronin called The Ferryman. Cronin is one of my favorite kind of automatic authors. I see some videos of that going around right now. I might need to update mine. But when I did mine, Cronin was on there. This is only his 6th book, and 5 of the 6 I've given 5 stars. So is this the one that didn't get a 5-star or not? Well, you'll find out in about a minute and a half. This is an interesting story. First of all, going in, I didn't think it was science fiction. When I read kind of the cover blurb or the inside flap blurb, I thought it was more a work of fantasy. But it kind of blends some elements. But this is kind of set on a futuristic Earth where all of humanity lives in kind of this utopian ideal on this island somewhere, we think, in the Pacific, and it's quite futuristic. And everybody that lives on this island in this kind of idyllic atmosphere, they have kind of these sensors on their arms where it has like a readout that tells them how long they have to live, because they are very long lived in this world. And as their number kind of dwindles down, that's when they know that it's time for them to go and be reborn. And that's where the ferryman comes in. His job is to ferry across these straits to this other island, the people who are about to expire, so that they can be reincarnated. And what was fascinating to me is I realized as I was reading this book, there's this huge mystery. You don't know what's going on. And I wasn't trying to guess, which a lot of times when there's a mystery in a book, I'm often trying to guess what's going on. But with the ferryman, I just accepted that this was a mystery and I was going to find out. And there are times where Cronin does some really interesting foreshadowing where he says, oh, all the players were in the same room at the same time. I should have seen it coming. And you really don't even have a conjecture, at least I didn't. It's very interesting. 2/3 of the way through the book, this book changes dramatically. And I could easily see somebody not liking that change and where the story goes, and someone like me who loved it. It goes in a very unexpected direction. I did not see it coming at all. Initially, I wasn't on board, and then at a certain point, it hooked me. And the one thing Cronin does is he's such a visceral writer. I just keenly feel the words on the page. And I keenly felt for this ferryman and this situation that he was in that is revealed later in the book. Loved the ending. I thought Cronin stuck the landing. 5 for 6 for me. This is a 5-star read. This is The Ferryman by Justin Cronin. Highly recommended. If you haven't read Cronin, he's fantastic. Pick this one up. I had a second audiobook listen that I finished this month. I think I finished this on the 1st of the month because I started it way back in May. And that was Star Wars Brotherhood by Mike Chen. Now, the Star Wars books are a little uneven, but I do love these audiobooks because we have sound effects and we have soundtracks, but they're uneven because it's a lot of different authors and they bring different things to the table. Well, this is the first time I read Mike Chen, and I'll read more of him because this one was very good. This is set in Clone Wars era Star Wars, which is one of my favorite. It's set right after the events of Episode 2. So we see for the first time Anakin and Obi-Wan kind of separated from one another. Anakin as the new Jedi Knight. He's secretly married. And you see him dealing with all of that, like some major life events. While, of course, a war has just erupted. And all of a sudden the Jedi, who are peacekeepers, are now soldiers in this war. So there's a lot going on there. And I think one of the aspects that Chen does very well in this book is the characterization of Anakin and Obi-Wan. Not all authors, I think, get it right, but I think Chen gets it very right in this book. There's another thing that I really loved in this book is that we get the first entrance, the first meeting of Asajj Ventress. And Obi-Wan meets her, Anakin meets her, they meet her separately, and they don't meet her in a manner that you would expect. And it's very interesting, especially if you know Ventress's character arc, especially if you know the whole character arc. If you don't know the whole character arc, read Dark Disciple, probably my favorite Star Wars novel. It ends Ventress's arc. It was supposed to be an 8-episode arc of Clone Wars when it originally got canceled. But I digress. I really enjoyed that meeting. My only kind of criticisms of Brotherhood was I felt that one of the main villains, not Ventress or Dooku, but one of the other main villains was kind of those mustache twirling villains. And although Chen explained why he was like that, he still felt kind of like a one-off. But the whole premise is really interesting. Just like the movie Rogue One was born from a single line from Star Wars, many Bothans died to give us this information. This book was born from one line in episode 3 where Obi-Wan talks about that business on Cato Neimoidia. And that's what this is about. And it's quite interesting. I will say, though, that the conclusion was not, it was kind of lackluster. Even so, I enjoyed the ride. I give it a 4 out of 5, and I'll read more Mike Chen Star Wars for sure. All right, my last 2 works in the science fiction genre I have already reviewed. They're both in this omnibus collection of Hyperion. The 2 books are Hyperion and The Fall of Hyperion. These are the first 2 books in the Hyperion Cantos, but they do kind of function as a duology because there's a major time jump between books 2 and 3 in that series. I already did a dual review. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. If you weren't aware, on BookTube, surprisingly, single and dual book reviews are easily every content creator's lowest rated videos. So go check that out if you're so inclined. But just very briefly, I loved Hyperion. It's probably a top 10, maybe a top 5 work of science fiction for me. It's more on the literary side of science fiction as we get this Canterbury-esque tales of these pilgrims traveling to see the Shrike, and they're all telling their backstories, and as they're doing so, you're getting kind of pieces of what is going on, but you also get to see Simmons' just absolute skill as the characters feel so different, their tales are told so differently. A lot of people don't like frame narratives. I really enjoy frame narratives when they're done well like this. And one of them is even a frame within a frame. I saw someone complain about that. I didn't complain about that because I thought it was so well done. So Hyperion was a masterpiece for me. I gave it easy 5 stars. Fall of Hyperion is very different. It's more of a straightforward work of science fiction. It has a lot more jargon, but you're still following these characters as well as some new ones that emerge kind of as major characters in this book. And this one had just a whopper of an ending. A couple times where I just said, wow, incredible. I would say that of the 2, it's a slight step behind Hyperion. I think most people have that opinion, but there are people that do love Fall a little bit more than Hyperion. But overall, I thought it was fantastic as well. I gave that one a 4.5 out of 5. I'll be reading both of the Endymion books in September, so you can look for my reviews next month of those 2 books. So my book of the month was Servant of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Janie Wirtz. This is the 2nd book of the Empire trilogy. I think I said when I talked about Daughter of the Empire last month, which was also my book of the month, that I was kind of kicking myself for missing this series in the 80s because I read so much fantasy in the 80s and I just somehow missed this one. But I'm glad I've encountered it now. This doesn't feel like anything else that's written in that era. The tropes are pretty much gone. What you get in these books are so interesting to me. I love the kind of feudal Japan type of setting that we get, the honor of these noble houses, but we have a protagonist who's very progressive in thought, who is in many ways rejecting or at least trying to overcome some of the more conservative and traditional nature of the world that she lives in. And I love seeing that aspect of her. There's a character in here that is much maligned by a lot of readers, but works really well as a plot device to help Mara grow even more. My favorite thing in life is growth. So when I see this on the page, it's something I gravitate to. As an individual, I'm on my own personal journey. I'm a musician. I'm always trying to improve my craft. I'm a music educator. I try to get better every single year. I'm very serious about that being my favorite thing in life. And every time I see it on the page, I just enjoy it when it's done well. And it's done really well here. Seeing Mara grow. The first book is more of a coming-of-age tale because she's probably about 17 at the beginning and it takes place over a couple years. This, she's firmly in her 20s, but some new villains emerge, some new situations emerge, some major political turmoil emerges. But seeing her learn and navigate through all of this political miasma is just such an interesting read. And I love seeing her grow personally as her obviously progressive views are starting to change this society. I also love that the people around her are such an important part as to why she is so successful in these political maneuvers. They love her. She is the leader of this house, and she doesn't lead her house through fear and things like that. And I just love seeing the reactions of the other characters, because their support of her is a direct result of her leadership style, but it directly influences just how far she continues to rise in the scope of the empire. I really enjoyed this one. There's a moment at the end that I loved. There's a very tough decision that Mara has to make, and I thought it was made so well. And I don't know if everybody loved that decision that she made, but I really enjoyed it, and I love that it kind of, the minute she took that direction, I'm trying to be vague, she didn't look back at it. But this is fantastic. I am loving this trilogy. Truth be told, I've read the third book by the time I'm filming this, but this is one of the best works of 1980s fantasy. If you haven't picked up this trilogy, you don't need to read the Rift War saga to get this. There are nice Easter eggs for those of us that have and enjoy that series, but the Empire trilogy by Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wirtz is fantastic. And Servant of the Empire is my book of the month, August 2023. So hey, if you've read any of these, I'd love to talk with you in the comments section below. Just please label any spoilers. I'd also love to hear, I know we're midway through September, but I'd still love to hear what your best book that you read in August is. I always love hearing what you're reading and what you're loving. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.